Sugary sweet tunes are coming your way with these jukebox cookies. Hi, I'm Leslie with Leslie's Cookies and Treats, and if you love decorating sugar cookies or you want to learn how, you're in the right place. Let's decorate together. So welcome to the Hop. Today we're going back in time and making these adorable anniversary jukebox cookies. Now I want to tell you that this is a more advanced cookie and it's pretty detailed, and so if you're making this for a part of a cookie set, you want to kind of make this as your focal cookie and not make a whole bunch of them. It is quite time consuming. My icings are all going to be a 15-second consistency, and I'm going to start in the center and work my way out. So I started by outlining this little bit here in white, and then I'm going to flood that in. And I'm going to use my scribe to settle the icing down and shape it as needed for every single bit of this cookie. And then in between every section of this cookie, it's going to go in front of a table fan or in a dehydrator to dry and crust over before these little sections have a chance to crater. So I use my scribe to get the edges nice and sharp of that bottom part here, and now I'm going to go ahead and move up to the top part and do the same thing. And then this cookie will go in the dehydrator for about 5 minutes to set up, or you can put it in front of a table fan like I said. All you have to do is wait for the icing to crust over before you go on to the next part. So I'll pop it in my dehydrator and be right back. And here we go, and I'm going to go to the next section. I'm going to clean off my piping tip and outline and flood this in with the blue royal icing. Again, my icings are all in a 15-second consistency, and I'm going to use the same icing just to flood that in. I cut a little bit bigger hole in the icing. And then I'm going to use my scribe to make sure that my icing is smooth. It's all the way down to the cookie. I don't want any air bubbles in this icing. I do not want a crater. So I'm going to take the time it needs to work with it with my scribe. And then it went right back in the dehydrator for about 5 minutes. Now I'm coming back in with the next color, which in this case is yellow. And I traced all of the outlines for my design onto the cookie using a projector. But you could also use the paper piecing method really easily for this, and I'll leave a link in the description for how to do that. And you can watch a video tutorial on how to transfer your design. So once again, I'm using my scribe to kind of shape and straighten these corners and edges, and then I'll set this cookie back in the dehydrator. By putting the cookie in the dehydrator and letting each color dry for a few minutes until it crusts over, you're keeping areas of separation so that you do not have any colors blending together or running together. And I'm going to outline this section here in red, and then we'll go ahead and flood that in as well. And we're going to do a wet on wet effect with red icing, so stay tuned for that. And as I said before, I'm going to make sure that my icing is all the way down to the cookie. I've popped any air bubbles and everything is nice and smooth. And then I'm going to come back in with my white icing and make little tiny dots right across the top here, just by putting my white icing right down into the red icing and making little dots. And that's the wet on wet effect I was talking about. And then I put that back in the dehydrator to dry for about 5 minutes until the red crusted over. And now I'm going to fill in this section here. And then once again, I'll use my scribe to settle it down and get the corners nice and sharp. And then because the red has already been drying in the dehydrator, I can go right ahead in with my next color without putting it back in the dehydrator first. And so I'm going to outline and flood in each one of these sections, and I'm going to use my scribe on them, but I'm not going to show that anymore in the video because you've seen it. And just know that you need to use your scribe on every single section. And then once we finish outlining and flooding in all of the blue, this cookie needs to go back in the dehydrator or in front of a table fan until the blue crusts over. And then we can come in and put in this last bit of yellow, and I messed up here with my line, so I'm just going to wipe it away with a paintbrush and then repipe that line and flood it in. And just because I said this was a more advanced cookie, it doesn't mean you can't do it. Even if you're a beginner, you just need to be patient and give yourself some time. It's just a series of little sections that you need to flood in, and what makes it more difficult is because these little sections do have a tendency to crater, and also they could overflow the section if your icing is not thick enough, so you really need to make sure your icing is at least a 15-second consistency, and take the time to put it in front of the fan or in a dehydrator after each little section so that it can crust over quickly. Otherwise, it's just really step by step, and you can do this cookie even if it's the first cookie you've ever decorated. I'm just going to fill in the little bands on the outside of the jukebox here, and I am going to show you that I'm shaping it with my scribe. And I'll do the same thing at the bottom here, and because I don't like my line at the top or at the side here, I'm going to take a dampened paintbrush where I've wiped off all of the water and kind of fix that edge. I'm going to be very careful not to push too hard because my other colors of icing are still wet underneath the top surface, and I don't want to dent my cookie. So once I get my line all straight, I'll go ahead and fill in the ones on the other side and put it back in front of the table fan or the dehydrator to dry, and then come back in and fill in the heart. Now I'm going to set this cookie aside to dry completely. Now that it's dry, I'm going to use a stencil scraper from the Cookie Countess and an edible marker and just make a little crosshatch crisscross pattern here on the bottom of the jukebox. So I'll make diagonal lines one way and then turn the cookie and make them going again the other way. And then I am going to put the cookie back under my projector to make the music notes. I also use the projector to transfer the words "in the mood." I'm going to use my stencil scraper again to make some horizontal lines with my edible marker across the top of the cookie here, and then I'll draw in the music notes. Again, if you don't have a projector, the tissue paper method would work really good for transferring this design, and I'll leave a link in the description for how to do that. And I apologize for the flashing lights. It happens whenever I'm videoing my projector, and I don't know how to make that stop. So if anybody knows how to do that, let me know. And we have one last little bit to do, is to add some lines here to the side for some texture and interest. So you're going to want to touch down with the piping bag, lift up slightly, and drag 3 short lines across the top. And our jukebox cookies are done. I really think these are special, and they'll make a great addition to any Valentine's Day set or anniversary set or just any 50s party or sock hop that you're having. Anyway, stay tuned for the rest of the cookies in this set. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And remember, you can do this. It's just taking it step by step. I'll see you next time.